Morning, everyone. Ira Feuerstein here with Threat Protector. Thank you so much for joining. People are coming in from all over the country. We appreciate you spending some time with us today to hear about a very, very important epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. It's this cybersecurity problem that we're having in the world that's really exponentially growing. And we've got a great chat for you today. We're going to talk about how to protect your data in this crazy world that we're living in. I've brought some excellent guest speakers in. I'll bring them in here in a moment. But to get started, I want to tell you a little bit about Threat Protector. So, Threat Protector is a business to business cybersecurity company. We offer a host of different products from security awareness training to endpoint detection and response to managed security operations center, SIM and SOC, to email encryption, email protection, and also data backup, storage, and recovery, which we're going to be talking about today. You're in for a treat. And, if you're a potential partner, a customer, there's going to be a lot of fantastic information here for you. I've got you all muted. But there's a chat window. I keep pointing over here because I got a separate screen over here, but we've got a chat window. You can ask your questions. I've got some fantastic people on the line today who are going to be able to answer those questions. And we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of how to protect your data because cyber security and breaches in general can be awful. I read a statistic last week that said 85% of SMBs, and they define SMBs as anything up to like 2,000 employees that have a data breach will go out of business. Let that sink in for a minute. This is very, very important information. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest speakers. We got Michael Bronca and Jeff Slap on the line. Guys, you guys can welcome to unmute and come in on video. Thank you for joining. So
Absolutely.
Michael and Jeff, company called Steel Dome. Their product is called InfiniVault. And Threat Protector is the exclusive distributor of this product in the channel. So we're excited. We're excited to be part of this, and I'm excited to bring it to you. So, guys, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. I want to start I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You can start sharing yours. Hold on one second. So, before we kind of get into the prezo, what I'd like to do is talk about kind of the state of the world we're in. From your perspective, what's it look like right now from a cybersecurity, cybercrime perspective, and what are these end customers dealing with on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think that as you were stating before, probably the most critical piece for any SMB is to have a good understanding of having to develop a true cybersecurity posture, right? And I think for a lot of SMBs, that requires a lot of time and effort. But what's first and foremost for them is to understand that the data that they hold, anything that they hold as customer data, their own proprietary data, all of that essentially is the currency in which ransomware attackers are dealing in, right? So the value of their company essentially becomes how much ransomware attackers are able to extort that money from them, which causes them financial damages as well as reputational risk, which is why, as you said, about 85% of the SMBs that suffer a significant breach event with ransomware go out of business. So they need to understand what is their critical data, what are their critical data assets, and then have a way to be able to protect that data and then ship it offsite so that it can be an always on-demand recovery point that's been protected in the cloud outside of their infrastructure. So if they are breached or have some type of major event, they do have a way to recover without having to suffer the reputational risk as well as potentially have to pay the ransom to get their data back.
Yeah, I've seen many customers who think they're backing up their data. At least they feel like they are. But when rubber meets the road and something awful happens and they try to restore all that data, they find out it's not what they thought it was, and they're still in trouble. I mean, is that a problem you guys have seen out in the market with businesses before, or am I just making these things up and not I'm not really seeing the truth?
Yeah, I think that that covers a couple of different areas. I think that there are a lot of kind of legacy way of the way that customers are handling their data. They don't necessarily truly back them up, verify all their backups. What is the veracity and the sanity of the data that they're backing up? Uh, but a lot of times they're also keeping those backups on premise. If they are breached and suffer a major event within their own infrastructure, they don't have a recovery point because whatever system they backed up to may have been compromised as well, which essentially renders that entire backup process moot for them, right? They don't have a recovery point. So I think that that's a huge risk that smaller customers take on, where they may not be as well versed as they would like to be in how to approach cloud and cloud infrastructure. And that's a problem and a paradigm that we're helping to solve for them by taking a lot of the complexity of how to manage cloud or cloud infrastructure and cloud solutions for them.
That's interesting. Like I never thought about that. So if a bad guy were to breach a company, they may start out with maybe deploying ransomware, or maybe maybe they're not even deploying ransomware. Maybe their goal is to steal all the information and do something with it, right? So they literally may get in through some guy clicking on a link, but then they can go laterally within the system, and they could basically have a breadcrumb trail to where all the gold lies, and then break into the vault. That's what they do, right? So even if it's offsite, it could be, if it's not protected well, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. And what happens is what sometimes people don't understand about what ransomware attackers are doing is when they are uh, um, compromising your data, potentially encrypting it, and then exfiltrating it, taking out of your infrastructure or out of the destination or wherever you put that data, is that they are actually going twofold into how they operate on that data. The first is the ransom that they demand for the data. And the second portion is they are taking copies and keeping copies of that data, whether they give you a copy back or not, as part of that ransom transaction. They are then selling that data on the dark web. So not only did they take your data and create a ransom event, what they're doing then is then reselling that data on the dark web. So the company and its customers are then suffering a second time because then the actual ransomware attackers are selling that data and continuously compromising their customers.
Wow, wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. And one other thing I read, and then we can kind of get into kind of the nuts and bolts of like how you solve for these issues, right? But one thing I read online, which blew me away also, is the world of cyber insurance. Like I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing customers on here of ours already that are customers of other products. The world of cyber insurance is getting to be, it's almost getting to the point where it's impossible for you to insure your business for cyber insurance unless you have a fantastic storage and recovery process in place. I mean, there are other pieces of the puzzle too, no doubt. They want to see security awareness training, they want to see multi-factor authentication, they want to see some of these other things. But a huge piece of this is if you don't have effective storage, backup, and recovery, you might as well kiss your cyber insurance chances goodbye. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what cybersecurity insurance companies have been doing lately is coming back and actually auditing back their own existing client base to find out where those solutions are, how have they been provided, as well as asking customers to provide attestation as to where that data resides and how it would be recovered in a zero trust model, similar to what Steel Dome is providing to our customers.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So why don't we jump in? Why don't we start talking about how we solve these issues, right? I think we all understand the severity and what the ramifications can be if customers don't handle this. So let's dive in and talk about nuts and bolts here.
Terrific. Thank you, Ira. So, what we are looking to do is first, we just want to touch a little bit on how a lot of customers and MSP providers are potentially providing existing solutions to customers. which we qualify, even if it's ransomware or power outage. To us, these are large data loss events, right? They could be viruses, could be malware, ransomware, but essentially what it does is it essentially um, puts the customer in a position where they can no longer access their data for whatever reason. And the current paradigm of how customers are dealing with this is that they are required to either purchase an appliance, like a pre built appliance, or they have to build infrastructure that includes enough storage, compute, and memory to kind of create their essential first backup for all of that data, to either leave it in that appliance, or if it's a little bit more sophisticated, potentially take that off site to a very strict, specific kind of cloud, right? So it could be the manufacturer's only specified cloud. With that, that requires either the customer and or the partner to have intimate knowledge of that entire system, have technicians and engineers and support folks that are trained on the solution, as well as being able to support it, monitor it, care and feeding, power, and provide all the environmentals and everything that they need to have that entire solution in place before they then start to then provision and create the backup targets and do all of that pre-configuration. Depending on the size of customers, that could take days or weeks, and that becomes problematic depending on how large a customer is or how many clients, separate MSPs are operating within their infrastructure. So what we've looked to do is provide a fully managed solution. So Steel Dome will essentially take that entire solution from cradle to grave, with beginning of a 15-point questionnaire for the customer. It takes them about 15 to 20 minutes to fill out. They submit that back to us, and then within a day, we provide them an OVA file so they can essentially launch a small 100 gig virtual appliance that's 100% software based. And then we immediately begin the provisioning process with them to start creating the backup targets in a number of different protocols that we'll go through so that they can have essentially their backup solution working within hours of initially setting up the small software appliance.
That's fantastic, because speed is of the essence here, in my opinion, right? And companies don't have the risk is too high to spend weeks or months setting up a backup plan, right? Here we're talking hours, and that could be the difference between life and death of the business. So the fact that this is easy for customers to deploy, that it's fully managed, I want everyone to take that away from this, that this is fully managed for you. There's nothing you have to do. It's all fully managed by our friends at Steel Dome. That's a big deal, very big deal, and it's easy to use.
Absolutely, and I think especially for a lot of the managed service providers and even the end users, I think that there is what I would call technology fatigue. I think that there are so many different technologies that not only customers and partners and MSPs are required to learn. It becomes an issue about how many resources can you have in house to manage all of these different types of systems, different types of security infrastructures and backup solutions. So what we're trying to do is give them a way to provide a highly secure, highly available backup solution without necessarily having to learn yet another technology that they will constantly have to maintain certifications on, have people take soft costs for training hours and the like, just to be able to support a backup solution that every customer needs.
Awesome.
So as we were talking about different types of protocols, what we've essentially done here, and I'll let Jeff absolutely come in here and kind of speak more to some of the more detailed portions of some of the technology here. But essentially, as we go from left to right through this diagram, this representation of customers' infrastructure, we have all of their application servers, data. If they're running existing backup software like Veeam or the like, They have all their data. We can actually have that data presented to the vault in any one of these essentially universal network protocols, whether it be SMB, NFS, native S3, iSCSI, or SFTP. Essentially, what we are doing is we are presenting the Vault's ability to have the data look like local storage to the customer's network. So they can operate any one of these different 5 protocols, either individually, all at the same time, or in any combination. So what we're looking to do is help them create different file structures and be able to handle different types of data. For us, it really doesn't matter what type of data it is. So it could be email, it could be file print, all the different files, databases. We even have customers that are presenting old AS400 type data to us across all these different protocols. And essentially what we're doing is we are asking customers to create us as the target for the backup for all their critical information. As it passes to the edge of the, sorry, go ahead,
So
Aaron.
Michael, you were saying, yeah, you were saying something that was interesting to me. I just wanted to confirm it.
Sure.
So like when I go to my computer, I'm that guy who's not technical, right? So I talk in very basic terms, but so I go to my computer and I have a C drive, right? And I have my OneDrive there. So to the end user, your offsite storage just looks like one of those on their computer. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. It does, right? So we create similar looking targets. It looks very much like that file structure. They can, simply call it backup data for OneDrive, something like that. And then that's how it appears to them, right? So they send the data there. And as soon as we see the data, we automatically start checking it for signatures of malware, antivirus, and ransomware, right? As soon as we effectively see that the data is clean, we will then encrypt the data, right? So that the data can then be protected. That encryption happens in transit as well as at rest. And then we send that data automatically out to the cloud, right? So we normally choose at least 3 different cloud destinations or geographic diverse locations so that they have an always on demand and available data stream to be able to back up from, right? So the data that's presented to the vault, they can see. So as they're presenting data to the vault on a day-to-day basis, if there are files that are there that they want to recover or they want to take or a look at or use that are in that file structure, they can absolutely do that. What we do for whether it's a major breach event or a data loss event is we have a multi-factor, live in-person, zero trust transaction between the Steel Dome team and either the end user or the MSP, where they go through a series of protocols where they can ask us to have a historical point in time recovery. So if let's say the customer's breached yesterday at 1:00 p.m., they can call us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have unlimited remote engineer support for any type of incidents or assistance that they need at any time. And they will essentially go through a multi-factor protocol where we will present duo pushes to them only to authorized users on the account. After we receive that PIN code from them, we will then ask them to affirmatively answer 2 separate security questions. And once we have those affirmations, they can ask for data as a backup recovery point for any point in time that they want. So if we were talking about 1:00 from yesterday, essentially we can present them back from noon from the day before and give them as a recovery point. We're taking
those recovery points. How often are they done?
They're done in 15-minute intervals. So we are taking snapshots of their entire infrastructure data.
It sounds like my dog. Except my dog is drugged up right now because she decided to eat a whole tennis ball last week and swallow it whole.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that was expensive. But anyway, but so this is interesting. So you have every 15 minutes, you have these point in time snapshots. So like, if I got held ransomware right now, technically you guys could look back 15 minutes ago and reset it as it was 15 minutes ago.
Absolutely.
That's insane. Like, to me, that's worth the price of admission right there, because then customers know that, listen, my data backups not only backed up, but they're fresh. Like, we can go back 15 minutes ago. That's a big deal.
It is, because it's not only the actual event itself, but there's also the time it takes to recover and how far back you have to go, right? So if you don't have this type of continuous intervals, essentially what could happen is you may have to go back an entire week of work or an entire month of work to recover your systems, which, depending on the size of the organization, is not only costly and timely, it affects their ability to transact existing and current business, as well as how they're interacting with their entire customer base, right? So how do they work on existing issues with customers when they're still in the process of trying to go 30 days back? Trying to re-input and rework 30 days back worth of data for billing systems, for information, files, and proposals, and all the different information that the company has, because if it's truly a large data breach event, they may have lost all of it. So they need to spend that time recovering all of it.
Yeah, and there's one point of emphasis here, Ira, I want to make, is that because we're taking snapshots every 15 minutes, and that schedule is completely customizable, by the way. We could do it every minute if you wanted to, and hold it all for years. Okay, it's a very efficient system, but 15 minutes is a nice number to use from a granularity perspective. But keep in mind, when companies typically back up their data, they're doing that normally once every 24 hours, typically, right? So one of the things that the vault provides is a different approach to how you're backing up, and of course also how you recover. It's equally as important. So companies today are now using the vault. Let's take a database as an example, because that tends to be one of the high value targets for a ransomware attack, because usually databases contain critical line of business data, where if that went down, the business is basically down. With database systems today, you can do continuous log shipping, which is basically just a recording of all the changes that have happened on the database system, and that target can be the InfiniVault, so that you can actually recover the most latest version of the data very, very rapidly. You can also do database snapshotting and other forms of data protection, right? And I use database as an example, but that can apply to any type of data set. But the more you do that, right, the more granular recovery point you can have, and that's one of the benefits of using that type of backup method with the functionality that the InfiniVault provides with the immutable snapshots. So I just wanted to point that out.
Great, excellent. This is exciting, guys. This is important stuff.
A couple other things just to emphasize here before we move on to the next slide. We've taken the approach, when we said at the beginning of the presentation, right, ease of use, right? That's really what we've worked extremely hard to do here with this product. Anybody who's worked with backup systems, data protection systems, or or the cloud, know that these systems are not simple. Many years ago, when I was in the service provider world, in the data center space, I was in charge of deploying very large enterprise backup systems that took months to deploy properly, and had lots of moving parts and lots of interconnections and dependencies and things that you had to make sure that everything was compatible with all the different pieces. There was a lot of moving parts. What we've done here is we've taken the approach of first presenting the vault over common protocols, right? These are things that every system on the planet can talk at least one of these protocols, which means that we never really ever get into a conversation around, does it work with this application? Does it work with this type of operating system? Because every operating system out there can speak these languages. And of course, the second thing is that the simplicity of this, right? Being able to bridge now that world, the private world where your data lives with your applications, making it very easy to get access to the vault over these common protocols, and now bridging the cloud world right? Which is all different, right? All the different cloud providers have their own protocols, way of storing data, way of distributing data. All of that complexity is removed, right? So really, at the end of the day, the only thing the customer needs to worry about, if we've done our jobs correctly in the design of this technology, is they just have to simply ask themselves what data is so important that if I lost it 5 minutes from now, the company would be down on its knees. We would potentially be out of business. That's the data that we're talking about protecting, right? I mean, any data, of course, is important, but the mission critical data certainly is what we're interested in protecting for the customer. And they don't have to get involved with all the complexities, all the security, the provisioning, the management, the operation, all of that. We've made that very, very easy. So we feel we've done an extremely good job at that. I usually use an analogy like we're the car dealership. You pick out your car. All we do is we drive up on a flatbed truck, drop it off in your driveway, hand you the keys, and all you have to do is get in and drive, right? You don't have to worry about how it got there, how it was built, how the engine works. All you got to do is, hit the ignition and hit the gas, and you're on your way. And that's really what the work is that we've done here with all these technology components that we've brought together to make this a very, very powerful yet easy to use solution for customers.
That's great. Hey, we have a question from Brent. He said he joined late, but he saw this slide about how all the data is transmitted. And Brent, if I'm not saying this correctly, hit me in chat. But I think what Brent's asking is, he sees that all this data is securely transmitted to the public cloud providers, and that's where it's stored. And he's under the impression that the security of the cloud providers are on them, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just gonna ask clarification. So are you saying that the security of the cloud providers is on the customer or on the cloud provider itself?
On the cloud provider, I think is what he's saying.
Right. So, and again, let me know if we're not going down the right path here, but that's an excellent point. What the Vault has been designed to do is to not rely upon the cloud provider, right? We keep the security within the context of the customer's environment, right? So the Vault data transmission, of course, is secured, and that's facilitated by the Vault going over the wire to the public cloud, and vice versa in transit. But then the data itself, as it's stored at rest, we're not leveraging the cloud provider encryption capabilities at that point, right? Because if you put all your data up on the public cloud and you use cloud provider backed keys, well, then they have access to everything, right?
Yeah.
Not that they're necessarily doing that. I'm not accusing it. I'm just saying people think, how do we separate those layers? And we have several of those we'll talk about here in a moment. But one particularly is the data at rest encryption keys are maintained on the Vault and are maintained by the customer. They're not maintained by the cloud provider.
That's
super important, right?
Yeah, that's really important. So Brent, hopefully that answers your question. So the data is encrypted on the way to the cloud provider. It's encrypted on the cloud provider, but the keys to that data don't reside at the cloud provider. Correct. So even if they got breached, there's really no way, unless they got the keys from you, or somewhere else along the way, there's no way to get to that information. Or they can get to it, but they can't do anything with it.
That's right. And then we'll talk about this in a moment on the next slide. Additionally, the data is fragmented, right, across multiple endpoints, usually geographically dispersed endpoints. And if you have an encrypted piece of data, in order to decrypt the data, not only do you need the key, but you need the entire complete block, and not one single bit can be out of place. So the fact that we're distributing the data adds an additional layer of complexity there for recovering the data. Even if the keys were compromised, you would have to compromise all of them at all the different points to do that. So it brings a much higher level of degree of security than just simply choosing a single endpoint and dropping all of your data there. So that's a benefit of how we distribute the data as well.
Okay.
At the data, right? We are looking to operate in a zero trust data protection model. This is a term that we've coined as data cloaking. So providing these 4 separate pillars simultaneously of how we act on the data essentially cloaks the data, makes it invisible to any type of attacker. It could be an outside attacker. It could also be an insider threat where you have potentially disgruntled employee or someone that's looking to potentially harm the data that the company owns, or potentially take that data with them. All right. So what we're talking about here is data survivability. This is what we're talking about as distributing this data across to the cloud providers. We can also provide this data survivability across multiple cloud providers simultaneously. So we can send and transmit this data potentially to AWS and Azure and Wasabi and Google all at the same time. So the customers don't need to know how to operate all of these different cloud providers. They don't need to know how to provision that, what that looks like on the front end, how to present that data to each of these different cloud providers. We are handling all of the scripting and automation and orchestration across the cloud providers of their choice, across these geographically diverse destinations simultaneously, all through the operation of the vault itself. Okay. As we said, data security. We are using AES-256 encryption on all of the data that gets presented through the vault, whether it's at rest or in transit. Data durability, as Jeff was talking about before, doing advanced error correction and to ensure maximum data integrity and durability, meaning that we are checking every single bit of data that comes through the vault, as well as when it is actually residing in the final destinations, right? Since we are also distributing across multiple cloud destinations, as Jeff said, that provides a much higher level of security, because essentially what's happening there is, without the ability to essentially reform all those data points simultaneously with the correct key, that data is essentially unusable and unreadable to anyone that is trying to act on that data. And finally, we get to data immutability. Essentially, that means that we are taking continuous read-only snapshots of that data. So essentially, the data that we take as being read-only means that once we take that snapshot, no one can then act on that data. They cannot edit, modify, or alter that data in any way, shape, or form, because essentially that snapshot is a read-only format. There is nothing to do with that data except be able to then use it as a recovery point into a system for any point in time.
You know, it's this is going to be an old throwback, but I remember, I don't know, 20 years ago, there was this guy who did these. He was a beginning of infomercials, a guy named Ron Popeil. I don't know if you remember that guy, but he always used to say, "Set it and forget it," right?
That's right. Yeah.
And is it? I mean, is that what we're talking about here from a client? I'm just trying to think from a client perspective, and maybe it's a company that they don't have a lot of IT people, right? Because we deal with that all the time. And a lot of our customers don't have IT staff, any IT staff sometimes. Is this kind of one of those products where literally, as long as they know that they're all behind the scenes is being taken care of, this stuff's automatically being backed up, is it really like set it and forget it?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do for customers when we say that it's fully managed, that it's a process that we handle through all of the orchestration and automation of all these processes. They just need to simply send us the data that they want protected, and we take the entire rest of the way there for them, right? We help decide with them where their data is going to reside, how often we take snapshots, and anytime that they need that data back, we will simply present it all back to them. So not only is it part of the backup process, but it's also a fully managed service on the recovery process, right? So they simply need to ask for the data from a date and time and a file, and then we will give it back to them, which they can then download back into their systems to use as a recovery point. So it's not just the set it and forget it on the way out. It's pretty much set it and forget it on the way back in too.
Yeah. You know, one thing I want to bring up, guys, that I talked to this client the other day, and it doesn't get talked about enough, but the concept of insider threats. You know, and this is what happened. Of course, I'm not going to name the customer or anything like that, right? But this is what happened. they had a disgruntled employee. He was an IT guy, and he blew out like all their finance stuff.
Yeah.
He just permanently deleted it. So I think people, you need to be thinking about that. If you're a customer, you need to be thinking about that. Like, you don't know these people that work for you, right? You don't know what they're capable of doing, or if the wrong person gets them. Like I've heard now, cyber criminals are coming to employees in your company and saying, "Hey, listen, $1,000. All you need to do is do this. Plug this USB stick in, or give me your password." And so insider threats are a big deal. But where I was going with this is, let's take it even down, even smaller. What happens if me, by mistake, I permanently delete some file I needed? Just one file. You guys could get that one file back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are taking that entire snapshots, all of that data is absolutely down to the specific file level, right? So if you were working on a specific proposal for a customer in Word format, let's say, and you happen to be working on it, you thought you would go back to it later, but then 2 hours after you had completed that proposal, you deleted it by accident. Essentially, at that point, we would already have 4 separate copies of that data, because we're taking a copy of that file every 15 minutes. So we can easily present something back to you at the granularity of a specific file name in a folder, just to present back to you, because that's what you need recovered.
Okay, perfect, cool. Thank you.
Right.
Ira, that point that you made is extremely important. I think it's over 50% of the time now. A already existing employee that already has full access to everything within the private network is the entry point, right? They become compromised, right? They get the payout. It's very easy. They already have access, because that's their job, is to have access, right? So that's a prime target. And that is another separation that I talked about earlier, right? When we talked about the encryption of the data on the cloud, how we're not using the cloud provider, we're separating from that. Same thing is true here. When you have to roll back the tape, so to speak, right, to a previous point in time, we go through that authentication and authorization check, right? When the customer calls in, we verify who they are. They have to be on the list. And after that series of authentication steps are performed successfully, that's when we're able to do that recovery point. So again, we're not assuming, just because someone says they are working for ABC company, that they are the trusted officer within the organization, right? So if we received a phone call from someone else in the organization and they're not on the list, we have to deny that, right? Just by the policy. So that's why that insider threat it's real. That's why we have that separation, so that those individuals who have bad intention cannot do further damage, right? That's exactly why that process exists. That's super important.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think as part of that too is what we also want to make sure is, as part of that is, insider threat can happen one of 2 ways. You can have a person that has bad intentions for the firm that they work for. And the second way to have insider threat is essentially to have escalated privileges from the outside. So having someone present, a company a phishing attack, where someone clicks on an email and then they put their credentials in, they think they're going to a good website or somewhere within their own infrastructure, but they're not. Then once they add their credentials, their true credentials there, the ransomware attacker then uses that, as you said before, to start moving laterally across the infrastructure of that company, to start gaining access to all different critical systems and assets. Right? So insider threat comes in one of 2 ways. It's the person that truly works there, that has some bad intent, or it's an outside party that looks like a credentialed administrator or someone similar, to have access to that information, to then start either exfiltrating, encrypting, or acting on that data in a way that's detrimental to the firm itself. So we just wanted to make sure that we, kind of drove the point home on a few key uh, critical points here. Again, these are fully managed backup solutions we are securing across multiple global cloud providers. So I believe at this point have verified integration with over 30 plus disparate and different cloud providers. So anyone from the AWS and Azure, Wasabi, Google, Yahoo, Alibaba, all these different separate cloud providers have all been individually verified with integrations into our platform. It is complete turnkey, meaning that we work hand in hand with the customer or the partner or the managed service provider to create a deployment model that suits their needs, where we gather information from them. We then assist them with the actual deployment of the vault and how they use their existing systems to target the vault for their backup destination. The service is 24/7, meaning that we have staffed engineers that are on hand at all times to assist with any problems a customer may have. We are also monitoring the actual vault itself to make sure that the vault is operating correctly, how much data is being passed through, if there are anomalies or ransomware, antivirus signatures that we see in the vault, we are automatically able to alert the customer via email that there is a critical event that's occurring within the vault, so that they can either look to remedy something that's happening in their infrastructure, or they can call in and go through that multi-factor process so we can then begin to work with them to establish where the errors are and then potentially point in time recovery points. We can deploy this on any private and or public cloud infrastructure. So if we have managed service providers that are operating their own data center footprints, we can work to have the vaults operate within their own infrastructure, their own private cloud, and or if they want to create cloud diversity outside of their own footprint, meaning they take primary backups for their own customers into their own data center, we can then use a secondary outside provider like a Wasabi or someone like that to present a secondary or tertiary copies in the cloud outside of their own infrastructure to protect not only the customer but themselves. If they suffer a major breach or security event, they know that their own customer data is actually outside of their infrastructure simultaneously, so they can help their customers recover while they work on their own internal systems outside of their own cloud. Right?
Yeah, and I think you were saying that customers should be storing this data in a minimum of 2, preferably 3 different places. Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, that's something that would automatically be provisioned on the back end, is to have multiple different cloud destinations. It would at the absolute minimum would be 2. It really would be 3 or more, where we are then able to distribute that data not only for cloud diversity and geographic diversity, but as Jeff was saying before, the more simultaneous copies we have of that data out there, the more difficult it is to then recompile that data with the multiple simultaneous endpoints with an encryption key.
Okay.
Everything that we provide as part of this model, there are no additional costs. There are no complex or hidden fees. So anything for ingress and egress is handled all in flat model pricing. That's something that customers and managed service providers would work through Threat Protector, depending on different sizes or capacities of what they need for each individual customer. They would work that through. But essentially what they are looking at is a flat model pricing that allows them to be able to understand costs, easily budget, and know that they have flat fees.
And we can store as much as they want. I know we were working on one a week ago that was like 2 petabytes or something, some enormous amount of data. So like, most businesses are not going to have that type of data, but if you do, we can handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the advantages of leveraging the public cloud is that it provides us an infinite amount of storage to provide back to customers, right? Since there's no private cloud that needs to be built necessarily by Steel Dome, and how we leverage the enormous amount of data and storage capabilities that are already being provided by the Yahoos and the AWS and Wasabis and Googles, we essentially can leverage all of that massive amount of data storage availability that exists right now to be able to provide multiple petabytes of storage for singular individual customers.
Great.
So here we just want to make sure that there are several different things to understand as far as there is an enormous amount of feature richness that comes with the actual platform itself. So we did want to make sure that we did have a listing of features and differentiators that your partners and MSPs can refer back to as part of their evaluation of how they view backup and disaster recovery cloud provider type services like this. Some things that we absolutely want to make sure that folks on the call understand is that there are no agents involved in how we deploy this model. So that means they don't need to then send separate agents to desktops, to servers, to applications, to databases. There are no agents required. Essentially, when they use us as a destination, that's sufficient enough information for us to see that information and that data pass through the vault for us to act on it, secure it, and then present it back into the cloud. It is an extremely small footprint as far as the engine itself that provides all of these services to the actual customer itself. So they don't need to have some large storage device. They don't need to have some other large NAS or virtual or physical resources that they need to either purchase or allocate from their existing resource pool to make this work. We provide the highest amount of compatibility, meaning being able to operate on those 5 protocols allows us to be able to operate essentially with almost any type of data system. So it's not really an issue of what type of data it could be. It could be Oracle databases, SQL, Windows files, Linux, almost any operating system or any type of data can be sent out to us. Jeff and his team have also done a terrific job of making sure that they have worked on out of the box, immediate, different public cloud application integrations. So meaning even if you have customers that you're migrating to Microsoft Office 365 or other type Google apps or other types of integrations, when you do that, you still do need to back up that data. So having customers at Azure with Office 365, we can back up all their endpoints, desktops, email files, OneDrive, SharePoint. So all these different types of files and protocols and applications within the platform can all be encrypted and then backed up site, whether it's at different Azure data centers or if they want cloud diversity to separate data providers, even though it's Microsoft Office 365 inherent data, we can then take that data and ship it out to other cloud providers for them. Okay, so I'm actually going to pass to Jeff here when we talk about different types of hypervisor or bare metal support. Jeff, if you want to kind of go through some of those different features and differentiators, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, just briefly, just for the sake of time here, be careful of time. I want to leave time for questions. I think Ira's tracking that. But yeah, so for organizations that are running their own private infrastructure, which very commonly is either VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V, those are just of course virtual machine representations of those application servers. We actually have hooks directly into those platforms to allow you to back up and instruct those systems to back up their data, in this case the virtual machines, directly to the vault without the need for any additional software layers above that. And that's probably a point to draw out here, is that when we talk about backup in general, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But generally speaking, when you're talking about backing up data, you're using another piece of software that's running somewhere, right? That is in charge now of, grabbing that data, packaging it up in that format, and then depositing it somewhere, right? Because the backup software doesn't do that itself, right? It has to be stored somewhere. And that's really one of the most, it's one of the three primary use cases that we typically find ourselves in, where you have an organization that already has some means of backing up data today, but they need somewhere to put it. Okay, and that usually is in the form of, believe it or not, tapes are still in use today, very much alive and well, and or some sort of physical storage device, such as a SAN or NAS or something physical in the data center that has to be maintained and managed, and then later upgraded or migrated from, and that whole hardware refresh cycle continues as we've seen since the beginning. Well, when we become the storage endpoint for that backup data, because we're completely based in software, and there's no underlying storage that's physically attached to us because it's all cloud backed, you get away from that, right? You can eliminate that complexity and having to manage that and migrate that and operate that layer that traditionally has been, a very large challenge for many organizations. So that's one area to point out there. So all these different types of features and capabilities really have, and we don't have time to go through all of them in great detail, but they've all been brought to bear within the product in order to make it easier to operate and make it a wider reach to protect that most critical data for the customer environment. So again, VMware Hyper-V for the private side. Like Michael had mentioned earlier, even though it's not considered a protocol, strictly speaking, we do provide support for all the major cloud providers out there, such as, like the Office 365, Google, Dropbox, you name it, right? We probably support it. There's many of them now out there. And the Vault is designed to hook directly into those providers. And it's able to monitor for changes on those providers and synchronize that data and protect it the same way we protect all the other data that is on the system. So, and of course, one of the things that's also worthy of note here is that as we go forward, as we mentioned on the previous slide, as the product continues to evolve, which it's constantly doing, the customers, of course, get the direct benefit of those feature and capability upgrades just as part of the service offering, right? It's not like there's additional charges for that. You get the best of what we offer as the product evolves over time as part of the base service offering. So that's a really nice additional component there as well. And another thing to also point out, which is actually pretty staggering, we're about ready to release another white paper speaking to this. The amount of data that we're dealing with today is tremendous. The world by 2025 will be on par to hit, this is an enormous number, 450 exabytes of brand new data that is being deposited on systems around the world every single day. And just to kind of put that in perspective, to generate 1 exabyte of data, we would have to sit on this video call for 238,000 years to generate just 1 exabyte of data. And we're doing that 500 times faster every single day. So you can kind of see why it makes a lot of sense to take a technology like the InfiniBall and marry that with the virtually unlimited storage capabilities of the public cloud. That makes a lot of sense given where we're going today, because it's becoming physically impossible to deal with this on an individual data center level basis. So by going to the public cloud, we really solve for that problem, because they've got all the storage any company is ever going to need. So that's a great benefit there.
That's awesome. So I have a question. A question came in about, like, what do customers do about, like, backing up data from cloud providers like Salesforce and QuickBooks Online and these other things? How do they handle those type of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all those types of platforms, those that you mentioned, and really all the others, have a way to do exports of that data, right? And of course, every one of them is going to be slightly different in how they do that. But in general, you can either do manual or automated exports of that data into a format that can be deposited onto the vault. So that's they would have to be specific to that platform because they all do it a little bit different. But once that process is established, it's as easy as any other backup stream to the vault.
Okay, that's great. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys have any other slides here? Or do we?
We just have some frequently asked questions. It's probably worthy.
Yeah, let's go through that. I think that'd be good.
Yeah. So some of these we've already touched on, but just to reemphasize, right? So is the technology easy to implement and manage? Of course, that's one of the principal tenets of what we've done around the design. We literally, truly mean that when we deliver this technology, the only thing that the customer has to really answer is what data is going to be stored there and protected by the vault. Okay, so we've removed a lot of those technical and complicated components that they normally would have to deal with if they were doing it themselves. Is it cost effective? Absolutely, right? Software based, cloud based, again, very low footprint, very low amount of resources needed regardless of what model you're operating in. So it's as efficient as it possibly can be, which means cost effective to the business. Can you continue to run either Amazon, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud in my cloud environment or multiple clouds? And of course, yes, the answer is yes, because we can cooperate, whether it's public, private, or a combination of the two, right? Hybrid cloud is very popular today. So typically you want to run the InfiniVault wherever the data set exists. And if you exist in both, then we can certainly operate in both. Perhaps my current backup solution. Again, we just talked about that. It eliminates the need for typical hardware resources such as tape, SAN, NAS, or some sort of physical storage device that has to be maintained. So that immediately reduces the cost and complexity for the environment, and you don't have to worry about upgrading gear and doing that hardware refresh cycle like we've seen in the past. And what does the support infrastructure look like, and do you have a customer-facing portal? So you actually have the ability to monitor the individual vault or a fleet of vaults if you have many of them in the field. And it really is, and it's an optional component, right? You don't have to do this, but we do provide an interface that allows you to look at the monitoring and alerting capability of the InfiniVaults that you have in the field. We obviously do that for you, but some customers really like to have kind of a status board of what the vaults are doing, so we provide that. And then, of course, our support system is also fully integrated, either via email or through web. Of course, you can also call into our operations center as well to receive support. And that's probably something to note here as well, just before we wrap up. In the normal day-to-day operation of the vault, the only time the customer actually has to call us and to get one of our support engineers involved is when a rollback has to occur, meaning there's been a data loss event that has occurred on the vault. Otherwise, if you've had a data loss event, let's say you've deleted a file on your workstation or on a system that you need to get back, you can just go to the vault as a normal storage device and retrieve that data without any intervention from us. Okay, so it's only when you need to roll back to a previous point in time that we have to get involved. So again, makes it very easy to operate on a day-to-day basis.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This has been fascinating. And for all the people who are viewing this, or if you're watching it on the replay later, I'm going to leave you with this. The availability or unavailability of your data is the life or death of your business. It's that simple. If you don't have access to your data, you might as well write your business off. Because the reality is the bad guys don't care if you're a 5-seat business, a 500-seat business, or a 50,000-seat business. They don't care. They're equal opportunity criminals. They're going to come after you regardless. And you know what? Smaller you are, the higher likelihood they're going to come after you, because they know you don't have the resources. They know you don't have the IT teams. They know you don't have the processes and procedures in place to come back. So this has been fantastic. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Michael, Jeff, thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Take care.